Your EHR is killing your practice, and it's not your fault. Walk into any conventional medical office and you'll fill out a paper intake form, right? Multiple pages, columns of checkboxes, symptoms, history, and the receptionist stuffs it in a drawer and probably never even gets filed in the chart. It's never used again. Why? Because the EHR can't process narrative data. It can't analyze symptom patterns. It can't think in systems. So that intake form, that one piece of documentation that should form the foundation of the entire functional medicine visit, it becomes compliance theater. Collected, filed, ignored. Patients don't like that, and it makes no sense. That's not a workflow problem. That's an architecture problem. I'm Dr. J, founder of Esprē Health. I've watched brilliant providers leave medicine entirely because the documentation burden became unbearable. Providers who knew exactly how to help their patients, but couldn't survive the administrative prison that their software created. The worst part? They blamed themselves. They thought they were slow or inefficient, maybe not cut out for private practice. And you know what? They were wrong. And if you've ever felt that way, you were wrong too. Your EHR was never built for you. It was built for hospitals and insurance billing. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why that matters and what changes when you stop trying to fit a system-based, story-driven practice into billing-optimized software. Why your patient's story disappears the moment they walk in. You spend 30 minutes reviewing a patient's intake form before the visit. Then you spend another 20 minutes asking the same questions because your EHR can't use any of the data. That's not a you problem. That's a design problem. Here's what happens in every functional medicine practice using a generic EHR. Patients fill out detailed symptom questionnaires. The receptionist files it, you review it briefly, then the actual visit starts from scratch. Ugh. Because the EHR has no mechanism to transform that narrative into usable clinical data. So you're essentially doing double documentation. Sometimes your intake people will do it as well, maybe triple. Once on paper to get to the story, once in the EHR, and maybe some triage or intake work to satisfy billing and compliance. Neither system talks to the other. Why does it happen? Because EHRs were designed for acute care and insurance billing. They expect you to check boxes that correspond to the dreaded ICD-10 codes. They don't capture complex system timelines. They don't take care of any of that or root cause patterns. The intake form is a relic of times gone by. So it becomes a paper artifact with no digital integration. That intake form should automatically build a system-based picture of the patient. Instead, you're manually translating that into checkbox fields that were never really designed to capture the totality and complexity of functional medicine. So that fundamental mismatch, the patient's story, is the essence of the foundational medicine visit. From the very beginning, the patient's story indicates the direction that their care should go. Each person is an individual, their story, right? They can't be homogenized into a system like widgets in a factory. And EHRs are designed specifically to do that, to create a standard format so every human being can be put into a kind of a generic mold. That completely flies in the face of what functional medicine is about. You're not slow. Your software is incompatible with your medicine. Your EHR forced you through compliance checkboxes that have nothing to do with your patient. Why you're clicking through 15 screens just to document a follow-up visit. Your patient came in for a hypertension follow-up. Your EHR wants to know about their social support network, their food insecurity, their fall risk. Well, none of that is relevant to you because you know your patient, but you can't move forward until you check those boxes. And you know what I'm talking about. There can be a huge number of those silly boxes. This is by design and not designed by you. Here's a real example. A patient comes in for a high blood pressure, hypertension follow-up. They have questions about, magnesium, berberine. Is there a compounded medicine that could do this? And your EHR has nowhere to document that. So ICD-10 for patient concerns about nutrients or inadequate response to standard meds, or that's not in there. What it does have is mandatory fields for social determinants of health, like we talked about, that you intuit that in a flash. You walk in a room and you can tell. And most of the patients you at least have a vague familiarity with, and those fields are just a mess. but you still have to formally do it. And why? Because those generic EHRs were built to satisfy the insurance billing requirements, the hospital system, politics. And these are checkboxes designed for that population level and for reimbursement optimization. That's business and politics. That's not medicine, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. EHR vendors, they design for their largest clients, big hospital systems, big insurance-dependent practices, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doctors. And those clients need software that optimizes billing codes and compliance and standardized care. But you, like me, in a cash-based functional practice, were never the target user. So every minute that you spend satisfying those compliance requirements and hospital-level things that don't apply to your practice is a minute stolen from your actual patient care. Add them up. It's a lot of minutes. You're not clicking through irrelevant screens because you're disorganized. No, it's not your fault. You're doing it because your EHR was built for a completely different business model. Your EHR thinks in diagnoses, not systems. That's why you're still charting at 11 p.m. Why you can't document the way you actually think, and why that's costing you your evenings. Functional medicine is system-based. Your EHR is diagnosis-based. That's not a small difference. That's apples and oranges. That's the reason you're still charting at 11 p.m. And that's why your documentation reflects time spent instead of patient outcomes. Functional medicine views the body as an interconnected system. It's not a collection of independent organs that are divided by medical specialties, not walled off, right? You're looking at a gut-brain hormone-immune connection. You're thinking in timelines, triggers, mediators. Your EHR wants a primary diagnosis and a treatment plan that maps directly to a billing code. That's the goal. When you evaluate a patient, you're mentally organizing symptoms and systems and cardiorespiratory, endocrine, detox, immune. You're identifying which systems are most compromised, and you're prioritizing your interventions accordingly. Your EHR has no mechanism to capture that. That's system-level thought. So you're forced to either write everything in a free text note, which is basically a word processor, which takes forever. I've done it. It takes forever, and it can't be analyzed or recalled. You have to page, with the third line down. Or artificially, you got to shoehorn that thinking into a diagnosis-based template that completely misses the point. So in functional medicine, you're not treating hypertension. You're addressing endothelial dysfunction, insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, HPA axis, all that stuff that creates high blood pressure. But your EHR wants you to document hypertension, uncontrolled. I don't think that gets it. I think it misses, right? And prescribe a standard med. There's no field in that for the patient's going to try magnesium glycinate and berberine, and then we're going to try to deal with the insulin resistance, look at their A1C with dietary modification. It's just not in there, right? And here's where it gets worse. Your standard EHR is designed to capture what insurance companies pay for. Time-based billing codes, standardized procedure codes, diagnoses based on the reimbursement. They're actually built to maximize the number of billable diagnoses you can assign, not because more diagnosis is better care, but because more diagnosis means more money, right? Which is, I'm not against money, but I'm against doing diagnoses as the center of your medical practice. This is the exact opposite of functional medicine goal. You're trying to identify and treat the root cause. Reducing the number of diagnoses as a patient heals, well, that's a novel thought. Less diagnoses is good. You're making the patient healthier, they have less diagnoses. That's a good thing. It doesn't work as well in the insurance system. You left the insurance system to practice real medicine, but your EHR is still trying to turn you back into a billing code generator. You're not bad at documentation. Your EHR literally doesn't speak the same clinical language you do. Imagine trying to write a novel using ICD-10 codes. I don't think so. Not going to work. Going cash-based doesn't solve the problem if your software is still built for insurance. Why escaping insurance doesn't automatically give you your life back? You left insurance to practice real medicine, so why are you still filling out those same stupid, meaningless checkboxes? Because your EHR didn't get the memo. The immediate relief of not dealing with insurance companies is quickly replaced by a sense of frustration, because most of the requirements of the insurance companies are still hardwired into the EHR. You made the tough decision to go cash-based, right? You took the financial risk, you're doing medicine you believe in, but you're still trapped. Why? Well, generic EHRs are built with insurance billing as a default workflow. Even if you turn off the billing features, the underlying architecture remains. The mandatory fields, compliance checkboxes, diagnosis first data model. You're still navigating a system designed for a business model you've rejected. Here's the other problem. In functional medicine, you need to prescribe compounded medications maybe. You maybe have some specialized labs. You need robust supplement tracking and patient education tools, and generic EHRs don't support any of that natively, right? So you're forced to bolt on multiple different applications and platforms and stuff to make that work. And now you're duplicating your data across entirely disconnected systems with this silly architecture at the middle, which has no respect for the kind of medicine you practice. Each one of those systems may require its own login, its own workflow, its own opportunity for information to fall through the cracks. And that's not good. The freedom you were promised is being stolen back from you, one meaningless checkbox at a time. Look, if you're tired of fighting software that was never built for medicine you practice, we built something different. Esprē Health is practice management software designed specifically for functional medicine. Systems-based documentation, intelligent intake analysis, no insurance compliance theater. We have a free trial. How could you go wrong? Just see what it feels like when your software actually understands what you have in mind. Link is in the description. When you're documenting for compliance instead of care, you're not actually practicing medicine. The identity erosion nobody's talking about. It's why the midnight charting sessions you're doing are destroying more than just your evenings. You went to medical school to be a healer. Your EHR turned you into a data entry clerk. Somewhere along the way, you started believing it was your fault. Here's what the documentation burden actually looks like at the end of a hard day. More than a couple of difficult patients have come through with complicated problems, right? Took a long time to get through the day, but you haven't recorded any of the information yet. You were too busy working with the patient. You come home, kind of rush through family time, and you get to the records before you forget everything you just went through, trying to recall it all. Your family doesn't understand why you're working until midnight when you only saw 5 patients. Your kids ask, why are you always working? Your spouse is frustrated. This isn't the freedom and balance you promised yourself when you left traditional medicine. And you're starting to feel like a failure because everyone else on social media seems to have it all figured out. Here's the cruelest lie the EHR industry tells. If you're struggling, it's a user error, not a design failure. Oh, maybe it's your browser. Not true. The reason you're burned out isn't that you're seeing too many patients or because you're inefficient. It's because you're spending 2 or 3 unreimbursed hours every evening doing work that doesn't benefit your patients at all and doesn't fulfill you professionally. So spending time documenting doesn't generate income, less revenue. You have to either see fewer patients to get out on time, or you have to work harder yet, and that limit's been reached. So emotionally, providers are sick, and they're tired of doing documentation that doesn't benefit the patient in the long term. It's completely unfulfilling and incredibly frustrating, and ultimately, it leads to burnout. You're documenting for a system that doesn't serve the medicine you practice. So now or later, it's not sustainable. What your practice looks like when software stops fighting you. When documentation takes 10 minutes instead of 2 hours, you don't just get your evenings back, you get your passion back. In an ideal world, the patient comes in having already provided their story. The basic evaluation and interview would have already been completed so that the more detailed and nuanced areas, that's kind of the sweet stuff, that's the center of your discussion. That's what intelligent software makes possible. System-based analysis from history and symptom data. Automated identification of which body systems are most compromised. Protocols that are aligned with the root causes and addressing them. Not just suppressing symptoms. Real-time documentation on the spot that builds a care plan as you work. Not something you reconstruct from memory at 11 p.m. The practice that has software that understands functional medicine is able to derive symptom-specific understanding from the complete story. So the contribution of each system to the overall picture is captured automatically. Cardiorespiratory, endocrine, all the different systems of the body. The protocols align with addressing every system rather than dealing with a single diagnosis. And here's what actually changes. When documentation takes up a little percentage of your time in patient care, connecting with patients becomes much easier. Ready for this? Being compassionate, it's back on the menu. I know because I've experienced it. Because you're not so frustrated, you're not worn out that each additional demand seems completely unreasonable. Returning to that early training day mentality, and you probably remember it. World was your oyster. I'm going to cure the world. When you were idealistic, ready to take on the world, it actually becomes your new normal. When an EHR actually supports your fundamental effort to provide care and connect with patients in a way that changes their lives, it entirely changes the experience. And leaving the office at 5 o'clock and beating traffic, it's a beautiful thing. This isn't theoretical. This is what happens when software is built for functional medicine from the ground up. So instead of retrofitting an insurance billing platform and calling it a solution, you get your life back, you get your passion back, and you finally practice the medicine you trained for without fighting your own tools. Your EHR isn't slow because you're incompetent. It's slow because it was architecturally designed for insurance billing, hospitals, population-level politics, not for the story-driven, individualized, system-based functional medicine that we love because it works. The intake forms get stuffed in drawers because the generic EHR can't use them. They can't process narrative data. They can't use that kind of data. So off it goes. And your patients know that, by the way, right? Software was built for hospital regulatory requirements, not cash-based practices. Your patients feel it. Those midnight charting sessions aren't a workflow problem. They're the inevitable result of using software that fundamentally doesn't speak the same language that you do. Going cash-based doesn't solve the problem all by itself if you're still running on software that was built for insurance. Here's what I want you to understand. None of this happened by accident. The reason functional medicine providers have been trapped by this problem for decades goes much deeper than bad software design. If this video made you feel seen, if you've been blaming yourself for a problem that was never really yours to solve, there's a reason I've been thinking about this specific problem for over 22 years. Why I built an AI 22 years ago that doctors are just now realizing they need. If you want to see what that looks like in your practice, go to esprehealth.com and experience it for yourself. And if you're thinking differently about healthcare after this, and you should be, subscribe, because we're just getting started.